So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our dinner keynote speaker, Dr. John Hunt. Woo! And as we're getting late in the day, I'm going to go ahead and skim through this because, again, my glasses aren't. So Dr. Hunt is a father, pulmonologist, allergist, immunologist, trained in the U.S. Army and in the U.S. Navy, started a bunch of companies, became tenured faculty at the University of West Virginia until the insurance system made him barf, his words. Worked in West Africa before coming back to America, American medicine to defame, denigrate, and disable the insurance paradigm. He's chief medical officer of Sedera Health, which is absolutely nothing like being a medical director at an insurance company, the author of Assume the Physician, Your Child's Asthma, and co-author with Doug Casey of Spectacular and Drug Lord. And he's working diligently on a vaccination to protect susceptible people against the epidemic of fatal infectious brain disease known as collectivism. Dr. John Hunt.
Boom. Thank you very much for tolerating me. So I'm going to begin my talk, which is on the effect of the mitogenic helo-1 beta on the morphokinesis of fetal kidneys in HK delta knockout mouse model. Bob, can I get the first slide, please? Bob? Bring it on, Bob. All right, we have a technical problem. We're not going to get my talk title correct, so I'm going to have to do some other talk. Do you guys mind deferring until later in the evening, about 11 o'clock, when I'll have my talk on mouse morphokinesis of the fetal kidneys? All right. Instead, I got to speak on something else, and I'm not quite sure what it's going to be until it comes out of my mouth. But Lee did put in his invitation to me that he wanted to be edgy, and to me, that is quite an invitation. He should be panicking now. He said I shouldn't be political. I will do nothing that says anything bad about the Republicans or the Democrats. Or I'm lying. I was going to begin this talk with to be or not to be and go into that whole thing. But Dr. McKnight did it before I got to it, and she did a much better job. It was really a kick-butt talk this morning. So then I was going to talk about burping babies because I am a pediatrician. However, Dr. Edison beat me on that one too. So with excuses, I am going to say something about burping babies because I just can't not. I'm a pediatrician. And it might be slightly different than was discussed earlier this morning. My background, Lee pretty much covered it, but I was at the University of Virginia, not the University of West Virginia. And woo, University of Virginia, you're the university that overbills its patients and then sues them. So I joined the University of Virginia after leaving the Navy to do a couple of fellowships, so I'm super ridiculously over-subspecialized. I'm way away from DPC in that regard, but you guys are my heroes, and I'm going to explain that in some detail in this talk, why you are such heroes to me personally. But I went to the University of Virginia because it was Jeffersonian. I left the University of Virginia. I resigned my tenure because it had gone totally fascist. And yeah, sorry guys at that table, I love you. So the DPC movement to me, when I learned about it, it was a real thrill. I see you all as, well, initially I saw you all as pioneers, but pioneers get arrows in their backs. So maybe it's better to think of you as heroes. And I'd like to define that term hero. And that term hero to me is got 4 parts. So it's a combination of courage, humility, great achievements, and high moral principles. Those 4 things. It's character plus action. And I think you all have it more than anybody else I've run into in the country of late. Heroes stand up against the monsters. And perhaps that's a problem in America right now, is that there isn't education in moral principles and ethics. There's no education in college or in high school. It's kind of fallen out of favor to even talk about morality and ethics. It's got kind of a bad taste in the mouth when we talk about it. and yet it's so foundational to get anything to be accomplished correctly. And maybe Americans don't have the ability to even perceive what is a monster or not. And how can you slay the monster as a hero unless you can perceive what it is, identify it, label it, call it what it is, and then you can go stand up and attack it. And that's what the heroes really do. They first have to perceive. Another thing a hero does is they use moral means, ethical means, to accomplish whatever they're trying to get to. If you use an evil means to accomplish an aim, you're Machiavellian, then you are using evil to try to accomplish potentially a good, and it'll kick you in the butt. You can't use evil means to get there. And that's probably one of the core bits of ethics that we should think about, that wasting our time by doing anything that's wrong is probably not worth our time. So you all are heroes because you've achieved the skills, you have the courage to stand up against the monster, you're willing to say your name in front of people who have large guns, i.e. the government, and say that I'm gonna fight you, I'm gonna stand up and do something you don't want me to do, and you're fighting a moral cause, for a moral cause, using moral means. You're not using the government guns against others, and that is what's key in my book. You're small, we're small, we freedom fighters are small in number, but remember at the start of the American Revolution, only 5% of the people who lived in the country, well, not including the Native Americans, but only 5% of the colonists were in favor of the revolution, only 5%. You don't have to solve all the problems of everybody in the world. You just have to offer a solution and let the good people come and find that solution. Don't worry about everybody else out there. You can be a light on a hill, and other people will mimic it. This whole field has grown from a tiny number, like 1, to a pretty huge number. It's growing faster than the S&P 500. It's growing faster than Bitcoin. It's kicking butt, and that's because it's good, and people are going to flock to it. You're heroes on the front line of a war that you probably aren't really thinking about, and that is, it's a war against a horrifically contagious disease. And Lee gave it away of what that disease is, but I'm going to kind of roll with this anyhow. It's a disease that killed 165 million people in the 20th century. It killed another 20 to 50 million people in wars outside of that first 165 million. It killed 25% of the population of Cambodia in one 5-year period in the late 1970s. It's highly contagious. It's very infective in groups whenever the large group is together. It infects the young who are most susceptible to it, who have not been immunized against this horrific disease that kills so many people. It cares not about political party. It doesn't care about gender. It doesn't care about sexual orientation. It doesn't care about your race or your creed. It'll infect just about anybody. It's a highly intrusive encephalitis. It's a brain disease. It will cause brain dysfunction and brain damage. The victims are unaware that they have this disease because the disease co-opts their defensive mechanisms. They are in denial that they have the disease. They are, if you kind of approach them and say, gee, you have this horrible illness and it's going to kill you and everybody around you, they will defend themselves against it, defend their ego against it by attacking you for raising the issue. It's just like alcoholism and heroin addiction. They will deny and defend against any accusation or any suggestion, even though you're desperately trying to help them. The pathogen that causes this disease is the smallest known pathogen. Let's go through the types of pathogens there are. There's like helminths and worms that infect your gut and climb out your nose sometimes. There's smaller than worms or like bacteria. Smaller than bacteria are viruses. Even smaller than viruses are prions. This is even smaller than a prion. It spreads through the air, it spreads by contact, it spreads through the airwaves, it spreads through the internet. Because it's not a typical germ, this particular pathogen is smaller than a prion, it's an idea. An idea is so small, it's not measurable, it has no mass. But don't underestimate the ability of an idea to disrupt neural pathways, turn on neural hormones, excite the neuroendocrine system, crank up your adrenaline, cross-wire your brains, and potentially permanently hardwire your brains in the wrong direction. An idea can do that. An idea can be good. It can solve problems and save lives. But a bad idea is a pathogen. And watch out for them because they will kill far more people than anything else. As I said, 165 million and more. And that pathogenic idea is indeed collectivism. And collectivism is the opposite of individualism. It's the opposite of an individual human dignity. It is a groupism. It is the underlying cause of racism. You can't have racism without collectivism, which doesn't mean that all collectivism is bad. Some collectivists can be good. Like we have a little collective in our family where we're kind of socialist in our family and we care about each other. It's a small group, and that's probably a good thing. But it also may sensitize children to being infected by the much worse forms of collectivism that are out there that they learn about in high school and college, because they see this, our little socialist little world in our family as a good thing. But you try to expand that beyond about 150 people, something often called the monkey sphere, and you can't connect anymore. We can't really empathize as humans beyond about 150 people who we know. Once you get it much beyond that, it starts to fall apart. And as you know, it's been proven in the largest experiments in human history, mass experiments, to fail as an economic system. And I don't just mean socialism, I mean fascism, socialism, cronyism, all of those horrible isms. They fail in the biggest experiments ever. Now that's not political, because I'm going all directions here. It's not Republicans, it's not Democrats. They're all infected with this disease, or potentially infected. There's this non-coercive collectivism, which is one form, and then there's a coercive collectivism. Coercive collectivism has an element of pure lack of ethics because it's coercive. And if there's anything that defines a lack of ethics, it's probably the initiation of coercion against your fellow man. But these other non-coercive collectivist diseases or problems are things like racism. It's not coerced. But it's a horrible illness. And why do these collectivist things cause so much problem? It's because unlike an individual who is a moral actor, who can make a decision between right and wrong, discriminate between right and wrong, any group cannot do that. A group cannot distinguish between right and wrong. Only the individuals within that group can. Sometimes a group can be dominated by an individual who's got a lot of power and a lot of drive, and then that individual's dominant personality may cause a group's effective ethics or effective goals to be controlled or swayed to that person. Now, that person who is the strongest willed person may be a good person, may be a sociopath, and yet don't know very often because they look exactly the same. But that group cannot make a decision outside of the individuals within it. So groups cannot change good to bad or bad to good on their own. Groups are not moral agents. So what kind of groups aren't moral agents? Any group. But let's go through some. Hospitals, unions, hospital associations, large medical practices, political bodies, guilds, all these things are groups. And they can't tell between right and wrong on their own. And anybody who can't tell between right and wrong is not quite a human adult. It actually defines the differential between adult and children in legal terms. So you might want to think whenever you're doing business with a hospital association or any large organization, you might want to treat them like a toddler. So I'm talking like the CFO and his minions at a hospital association who you're trying to do a deal with. Treat them like a toddler, because that's what they are from an ethical perspective. When you can sit down with a human individual like the doctor at a DPC practice, full ability to distinguish between right and wrong, full moral acting, that's a huge and important thing to have. And one of the reasons why you're my heroes is because of that. There's collectivism that's non-coercive that we are haunted by all the time. And I will refer to one first, which is anecdotal-based medicine, or anecdotal medicine, which is where a doctor has great success with some therapy in some patient early in their career, and they collectivize all the subsequent patients to that particular therapy. They say, this Combination of da, 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 and da worked really well to treat this. And they use it for the next 30 years. They teach their residents the same anecdotal success, and their residents use that trick, and they think it works. Anecdotal medicine is a form of collectivization, in that, again, you're collectivizing all your patients to that one initial success. Evidence-based medicine was created in Canada initially at McMaster to resolve or fight against anecdotal-based medicine. Evidence-based medicine, however, is of course a collectivist concept. It is taking a whole lot of data and finding averages and using the averages and trying to push that onto your individual patient. So evidence-based medicine is a collectivist concept trying to fight a collectivist concept, which is kind of like Stalin and Hitler in World War II, the two biggest bums on the block going at it. We have to be recognizing that there's value in anecdotes, there's value in experience, but it ain't science. There's value in evidence-based medicine, but it's not medicine. It's not how we manage or treat individuals. And one of the statistical laws is you can never take a data set and use that to apply to an individual. That's a core statistical law, and yet evidence-based medicine, it wasn't originally intended to do this, but evidence-based medicine has ended up being exactly that, which is taking those data and applying it as if it's a mandate to an individual. Be careful, because there's a lot of tyrannical evidence-based medicine doctors out there who will say, you gotta do this because that's what the evidence says. But I can tell you that when it comes to drug studies, what you're really doing is doing what the pharmaceutical companies want you to do, because they are professional, highly paid people who develop these studies and design the studies. You think that it's the scientists designing the studies at a pharmaceutical company? No, it's the marketers designing those studies. And they are going to find ways to get Advair sold for COPD, even though it only works in the people who have asthma and COPD, because they'll do a 30,000 patient study, 30,000 patient study for an outcome variable you should be able to see in 20 patients in 1 month. They do a 30,000 patient study to prove statistical significance that their drug works in COPD. No. It's a game. It's a scam. They're using evidence-based medicine against us. But we doctors, we look at, wow, that's a 30,000 patient study. That must be excellent data. That's like a primo #1. Got to believe that crap. Now, they're using us. So be aware of evidence-based medicine. It's another collectivist game. Don't discount it. It's a tool. It's a good tool in our armamentarium to show when something just simply can't work or makes no sense. But another one might be collectivist. We're going to talk about burping babies. So burping babies, we were taught by our grandmothers and by doctors to burp the baby, as was discussed this morning. And then evidence-based medicine, and that's anecdotal medicine. It's supposed to work, no proof. And then evidence-based medicine comes along and tells us, you're not supposed to burp your baby. But they don't have any proof that burping the baby is not going to work in this patient in front of me right now, right this second. That baby may desperately need to be burped right now. And the only way you're going to find out is by burping the baby. So just because evidence-based people are going to tell you that, Dr. Smith, what's your evidence that burping babies works? You can sit back and say, don't need any damn evidence. I'm going to burp the baby. So why do we in this room here despise insurance companies? Why did I quit? Why did I resign my tenure at UVA? Not just because it had gone, totally upside down, centralized command and control, but why did I leave it? Because insurance is a problem. And we all know this. I'm certainly not going to be preaching to the choir about the troubles with insurance. But I do want to point out a couple of things that you might not have quite thought of. Maybe most of you have. But insurance is a collectivist concept. When it was created back in the 1600s or so in the UK, it was developed as a pure collectivist concept in that the way that the insurance companies makes money is based on collective outcomes, the outcomes of the whole group. They don't give a damn about the individual. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to take the blame for this. The politicians decided to stick this innately collectivist concept of insurance smack in the middle of the most individualist relationship we should be having, which is between a doctor and a patient. What could possibly go wrong? It's a really terrible concept, and it does tell us about the politicians and the bureaucrats, diagnostic skills. They are really crappy diagnosticians. Not only did they diagnose the problem with the medical system as being too little insurance, but then they took the same toxin that was causing the problem in the first place, insurance, and they forced it down all of our throats. And that's when I left medicine, is because the horrifically bad system that preceded Obamacare, which the Republicans stood up and, Republicans stood up and say, this is the best healthcare system in the world. It was a crappy, crappy crony system prior to Obamacare. Obamacare simply took that the crony system of the previous episode of time and forced it upon us. And that is fascist. So when the people were standing up saying, Obamacare, yay, Obamacare, they were saying, yay, fascism. And you have to understand what fascism really is in order to understand why Obamacare is fascist. And we're going to define that here in a little bit. But actually, I'll define it right now. Fascism is a system, an economic system, the economic system component of it, in which the government feels it has the right and power and authority to do whatever it needs to do to accomplish whatever it thinks it needs to. That's the nutshell of fascism. No regard to ethics, no regards to law, no regards to anything else. Another definition of fascism is where groups, corporations, unions, guilds, and the like conspire with government to take power away from the individual. Either one of those two definitions of fascism works quite well, but I'm not sure you can find a better description of Obamacare than where groups, corporations, associations, and unions conspired with the government to take power away from the individual. It's a perfect description of Obamacare. So this coercive collectivism that has come into being is something that is different than the non-coercive collectivism because it's purely unethical. There's no place where you can have coercive collectivism and think it's ethical. That notion derives from natural law. How many people here know about natural law and are comfortable understanding natural law? So there's really just a handful who are willing to raise their hands. So for the people who aren't willing to raise their hands or don't know natural law, I do want to plant a few seeds because natural law is the foundation of ethics and morality. It's the thing that we have forgotten to teach everybody. And a lot of the things that you feel and do that propel you towards DPC or even to consider DPC come from an innate understanding of natural law. Natural law is very, very simple. It is a system of law that we discover. We do not create, we didn't invent it. We discovered it just like the laws of physics. And it's every bit part of the cosmic firmament as the laws of physics. It's the laws that help humans to relate to each other in a peaceful way that promotes life. And the two laws that have been discovered so far and tested over thousands and thousands of years are these two very simple laws. The first one is, do what you agree to do. And the second one is, do not initiate force or fraud against your fellow man. Simple concepts. Do what you agree to do is the basis of all contract law. Do not initiate force and fraud against your fellow man is the basis of all criminal law, or at least all good criminal law. Simple concepts. The stuff you learn in kindergarten is natural law. And yet, there are organizations and people who defy it all the time. Natural law is the foundation of moral principles, the foundation of ethics. Because if you abide by natural law, life is prolonged, life is enhanced, peace occurs. I mean, if you don't initiate force or fraud against your fellow man, there's no way to start a war. If, on the other hand, you have the opposite mentality that you can force and defraud anybody you feel like to accomplish some noble aim, like getting health insurance for all, think of what happens. You're forcing an innocent person to do what they may not want to do. That person may defend themselves. That is basically the mentality of war. When you initiate force against anybody, it's the same exact mentality as war. So the ethics that are opposite natural law are the ethics that promote death and destruction. They defy law, they defy love, they defy nature. And humans, if we are to survive as a species, have to get over the notion that we can force people to our will. Because all those aliens up there who beat us to the galaxy because they were 1,000 years ahead of us, 10,000, a million, or a billion years ahead of us, have all evolved into super high-powered, omniscient, omnipotent, and immortal beings, and they're not going to let us go anywhere near them as long as we want to force our will upon even our own neighbor. Maybe it's part of the next step of human evolution, that we can become like our Creator, only if we stop forcing people to our will. So this brings up a great opportunity to talk about another term and define another term, and that term is government. We don't often think about what the definition of government is, what the defining characteristic of government is, but I'll give you the defining characteristic, the one defining characteristic of government. And it only has one, and it only needs one. And that is, the government is the entity that within a certain geographic region has given itself a monopoly on the right to use force against the innocent. Think about that one. The government is the only entity that can initiate force against the innocent without that being a crime. So, in other words, the government is an entity that is in complete defiance of the second natural law, which is do not initiate force or fraud against your fellow man. So, maybe that's a reason why government sucks. I mean, the IRS, what is it other than a protection racket? If you don't pay what they demand you pay, they're going to bust up your store. The FDA, what is it other than a crony operation that is there to help big pharma keep all the competitors out? I mean, why on earth do we have asthma puffers that still cost $250 for a steroid that was invented 60 years ago? Yeah. Now, we can blame the PBMs. I mean, there's so many parts of the pharmaceutical process that are a disaster, no doubt about it. But you got to blame patent law, you got to blame the PBMs, you got to blame the FDA, and you got to blame ourselves a little bit for not willing to really stand up and go to foreign countries and illicitly import other drugs that we can sell to our patients for about our cost, which might be $25 for an inhaler. Sometimes you got to break the law. Oh, by the way, I am the CMO of Sedera, but they are not supporting that. So another reason that government sucks, who wants to be in government? I mean, who makes a good politician? You think about that. A good politician is characterized by a desire to have power over people. Not over things, but over people. That's sick in and of itself. B, or two, they have an ability to lie without compunction. They will lie with no guilt whatsoever. 3, they're narcissists. They think they have better ideas than everyone else, so much better that they're going to use politics to force their brilliance upon you. And 5, they have the charisma and skills of a con man. So you think about what makes a good politician, a successful politician, one who gets elected and takes over significant positions like the head of some Senate committee or whatever. You think about the qualities that they have. Who else has those qualities? And the answer is the sociopath. So sociopaths, they don't care about others. They have no empathy. They want control over people. They lie without compunction. They have no guilt feelings. They're impulsive. They're bastards. Perfect for politicians. And the sociopath wants power over other people, and they want to cause harm. Now, let me take a step back and say the active sociopath, the one who's not controlling their underlying tendencies, wants power over other people and wants to cause harm. Now, what's the better place to do that than in government, where not only can they have power over people and they can cause harm, but they can do it legally, because the government has the ability to force and defraud you all you want to. And if you don't think the government defrauds us, what is the Federal Reserve other than a giant counterfeiting operation? It's a huge counterfeiting operation that bought all our mortgages back in 2008 with fake money. Pretty bad, significant fraud. Maybe it's not the government, though. Maybe it's just the banks on Wall Street who own it. So sociopaths find their nexus of their strengths and their passions in government. It's estimated that 1% to 3% of the American population are sociopathic. The estimation of those in politics who are sociopathic is 30%. So imagine that one sociopath in your environment can disrupt the lives of about 150 people. Imagine 160 sociopaths in the House and Senate. 30% of them are very likely to be sociopaths. Again, you can't tell them. All you can do is say, well, let's see, liars, fools who want power over other people, people who cause harm. Oh yeah, you can name 160 in the Senate and House in a heartbeat who fit that criteria. I pity the person who runs for political office because they are either a sociopath or they're about to have, if they win, they're going to have colleagues that are 30% sociopathic. Why would you ever want to work with a sociopath? I mean, they cause hate and discontent wherever they go. You want to steer clear of them. So I pity the person who runs and wins. So government sucks because it is inherently evil and it magnetically attracts people who are inherently evil. So let me point out that those 165 million people who were killed by the collectivist epidemic in the 20th century were all killed by their own governments. It is death by government. And it's a real huge problem, obviously. These were the biggest experiments in human history. Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot. They took out all kinds of their own people. That's not including the wars that they started either. That's just killing their own citizens. In the US, do you ever wonder why we have certificate of needs laws, monopolies, cronyism, licensing boards, MOC, PBMs, third-party intrusions, price fixing? It's because sociopaths run everything, or at least they're influencing everything because they got control of the government. And it's very hard to fight off sociopathy. But there's another problem too, and that's stupidity. My co-author, Doug Casey, defines stupidity as the it's an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. Stupidity, an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. And a lot of people have that. I think collectivists have it because it's really not a disease. Well, it is a disease, but it's really something that they can choose to have. It's a choice that people have. And that stupidity combined with sociopathy, we're really up the creek. Explains a lot. There's a huge divide in American politics now, in which some people are natural law followers, whether they're knowledgeable about it or just feel it's the right thing because they learned it in kindergarten. And other people want to force their will on everybody. These people kind of hate each other. Will it cause a civil war someday? Could. We have to be careful of it. Civil wars have started for less. Will it cause a war of secession? Will Texas leave the Union? It could. And will that be bad? I don't know. I love America. The United States government, what is that now? There's nothing left of the Constitution, really. The Constitution is what created the United States, and it's been interpreted out of existence entirely. So maybe the United States is really now just another government that is filled with sociopaths plaguing us and trying to destroy what's left of America. I don't know. I've started a process of desensitization in you by using the word fascist. I didn't say Hitlerist, I didn't say nationalist, I didn't say populist. I used the word fascist because that definition of fascist that I gave you is appropriate. I want you to encourage you to feel comfortable to use either the term fascist or the term crony. They're almost synonymous in our current society. And don't forget that the socialists up there, the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren types, are the ones who are most aggressively pointing out that cronyism is a problem. They get it right. They know cronyism is a problem. The Republicans don't point it out as much. So I'm going to give credit to those guys. Now, the fact that every policy recommendation that those two have is going to increase cronyism, well, at least I'll give them the credit for at least getting the problem correct. Their plans, the plans are lousy. So is it worth lobbying Washington when they're filled to the brims with sociopaths? when they're not going to do what they say they're going to do anyhow? You know, I think it probably is, but just know what you're getting into. You're going into the worst place you can. You're going into the tar pits, where you're going to be playing on the playing field that they built, they designed, and it's completely greased up, so you're going to fall down every step you take. Because the sociopaths will do that. You need to know what you're getting into, and also keep your battles going down the local levels, because at the local levels, you haven't had the full distillation effect yet of sociopathy. There's still good people at the local political levels, and those good people can accomplish good things. Once you get up to Washington, you're really just trying to stick a thumb in a dike that's flooding, which is why, you know, if you think about the way maybe society should be or politics should be, you know, you really want kind of a Jeffersonian, libertarian federal government, because then it's really small and they can't do very much. Get the Democrats and Republicans to do battle at the state and local level, and in the family, hey, we're socialists. That works for me. But you got to keep that federal government from sticking its nose down everyone's throats. Oop, that got political. Sorry. More importantly, even than trying to fix the broken system, well, fixing a broken system is really hard to do. So Buckminster Fuller said that when you have a broken system, don't try to fix it. Instead, build a new system, a new good system, and the good people will come to you. And I'd recommend that while fighting to fix the broken system, you also keep building the system that you're building now, that sharing communities are building now, that the free market is building now. You're seeing all these opportunities, the free market's coming in all over the place. And it's starting something. It's tiny in medicine, but it's starting something. Keep building that, because that new system needs to be ready to roll out when the big system collapses. And that big system has to collapse. We have to be grateful to certain people. Surprisingly, I want to be very grateful to the designers of Obamacare, because the Obamacare design, totally accidentally, totally unintentionally, created this problem with high deductibles. That high deductible problem, where high deductibles are going up, opened up the doors to DPC. It opened up the doors to all these free market solutions that are coming in. Opened up the doors to price transparency. It started it all. And I'm grateful to these guys who stupidly made this horrific mistake of creating a plan that was going to inevitably lead to high deductibles. So let's have a round of applause to the creators of Obamacare. Woo! Yeah. A couple more definitions I want to give you just to stoke the fires. Free market capitalism. So free market capitalism is a system in which each individual person, to succeed, gets up in the morning with the intention of working their butt off to maximally and most efficiently create value for other people. Think about that. You don't hear free market capitalism and helping other people very often, but that is their incentive. Because in a free market capitalist system, they're not going to get paid unless they're doing exactly that. It's a competition to serve other people. Socialism, on the other hand, is that political or economic system in which you wake up in the morning to try to work as little as possible to make it appear that you are doing the whims of your political superior. Quite a difference morally. In one, you're working for someone's whims who happens to have a political place above you. In one, you are working to serve the needs of other people. Don't let people take the moral high ground away from free market capitalism. We're way on it. Now, with a caveat, there's the corollary, the Hunt corollary, and I'd say that about 10% of people are disabled in the free market, cannot survive, cannot thrive in a free market. They have physical disabilities, mental disabilities, psychological disabilities. They can't do it. And those people the free market does not serve, because it's actually to succeed in the free market. You wake up in the morning to work your butt off to serve the needs of other people who can pay you. And there's some people who can't. And if you don't have charity, the other option is coercion. Serving to take care of, let the people die. You can coerce the help from everybody, which is unethical by a very natural law definition. Or you can be charitable. And I would suggest we strongly consider careful charity as a huge part of what we are as a free market, because 10% of people just don't thrive. And I'd much rather have voluntary charity taking care of those people than to let a movement grow that coerces the 90%, oppresses the 90% who create all the value in the world, and disrupts their ability to create value in order to protect the 10%. We need to find the ethical way to protect the 10%. So I like to end a talk by pissing people off. So I'm about to. This ethic thing, it cuts both ways, this moralization stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about doctors. You guys know doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, and the like. They get shat on by sermo doctors. But let's think about them as humans. These are people who get trained, not as well as we are for as long as we do, to help make people feel better. What's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? Nurse practitioners and PAs are not our enemies. They're barely our competition. They are competition because we screwed up some ways. So then people want health care instead of medical care sometimes. And health care, by the way, is a right. Oh, did I just screw everybody? Oh my. Health care is a right. Nobody believes that in this room, probably. Maybe some people do. But I say health care is a right, but only if you define health care correctly, or my way correctly. So health care is the things that you do for yourself to keep yourself healthy. Stress reduction, sleep, nutrition, exercise. That's health care. Medical care is what you need when your health care fails. Medical care cannot be a right. Health care can be a right because it's only you doing it. You're not forcing anybody else. Medical can't be a right because you'd have to force somebody. Or at least that you think the whole process through, and clearly coercion becomes involved. And if you have coercion as part of a right, then you are supporting the notion of slavery. You can't do it. So anyhow, doctors give health care, often more than medical care. They're maybe in a little different field. We're not as well trained in health care as many nurse practitioners are. Yeah, there's a role. They're also fine, good people. Why would we want to alienate these good people who are on our side in so many things? So I'd ask you to open up your minds to nurse practitioners and PAs. We don't need to have poor self-esteem. We can compete with these people. Sure we can. I mean, we have tons more training, tons more education. It doesn't mean we're all better. I know some really sucky doctors, and I know some really fantastic nurse practitioners. Don't collectivize them. Let them stand up and fight. If we're going to shut them down, maybe we're being crony ourselves. There's times to shut them down, but really not shut them down. Shut the government down that's trying to get nurse practitioners paid the same as physicians for the same service. That's price fixing, and that's unethical. But don't shut the nurse practitioners down by not letting them prescribe. As a matter of fact, prescriptions are an interesting concept. You ready for this one? We have a crony monopoly on the prescription pad. Why? Why does a patient, an adult moral agent, have to come to us to get access to their Lipitor? Why for 12 to 14 years did they have to come through us to get access to their Claritin? We are serving as liability shields for the pharmaceutical companies. We're doing them a great service by this. We have co-opted the state laws to make sure that people have to come to us. That is unethical. It is unacceptable. It doesn't happen in the rest of the world. Some places it does, but much of the world has no mandatory prescriptions from doctors. If you want a pill or a bandage, you go to the pharmacist who's had years and years of training. In the United States, our pharmacists can, after their 4 years of education, can do nothing other than count pills and fill out insurance forms. How humiliating is that? These guys could be our allies, but they're not allowed to give out drugs without our imprimatur stamped on it. Why do we fight for this prescription monopoly? Is our self-esteem so low that we can't convince our own patients that we have value to them, that they should come to us to seek our advice about whether they're going to be on Lipitor or Crestor or whichever one's going to knock their muscles out of shape or cause them kidney paralysis? I don't know. But we can convince them with persuasion because that's the ethical way to go. Now, I proposed this on Sermo years ago. And this Sermo, which is like 40% libertarian at least, just dumped all over me. because all the patients are going to die if we're not controlling their Lipitor and doing it right. You know, people are not dropping dead around the world because doctors are not there in their prescription process. It just doesn't happen. People are smart, and people can still use doctors to get their medications, to advise them what medication to get. But we are, with that prescription pad, we are partially responsible for the large prices in the prescription drug market, because all these suckers would have to be over the counter without us being here. So I told you I was going to piss you off. Here's the third thing I'm going to piss you off about. Pricing. The prices in American medicine are hyperinflated. We are to blame. Who the heck sets our prices other than us? There, somebody applauded. We set those prices. Now, I can be careful. It wasn't we in this room. It was our predecessors for the last 50 years have failed to set fair, transparent prices. Our predecessors in our profession have fed off the third-party system. They've feasted off it. They've gotten wealthy. Europe doctors are not paid. Well, the UK doctors are paid well, but throughout Europe, they're not paid nearly as well as American doctors. We have feasted off the lack of transparency throughout 5 decades. We as a profession need to be humble and say, we screwed up, because it's only when we started losing our autonomy that we started getting pissy. And we started shaking things up and getting mad. That's not heroic. We should have been there when our patients were losing their autonomy, when the insurance company clerks were starting to rule the roost. So let's remember to be humble as we develop our new system. We are not perfect, not by any means. We are not God. We are not going to be able to be perfect. So as we build our system, maybe just look at natural law. Make sure it abides by natural law, and then get out of the way. Stop planning for everybody else. Plan for yourself, but don't plan for everybody else. Let the system grow with all of these wonderful booths out there prompting various different competitive systems to help us set up a DPC practice with this program or that program. Let them all duke it out in that wonderful free market capitalist world. And don't get in their way. Our political job should be to prevent people from getting in their way. If we can build a system on ethics and morality alone and not plan for every detail, the system will create itself. It'll evolve, because that's what free market capitalism can do. And as we build the system, we have to be careful not to use the immoral means that others have used. Because if we use immoral means, unethical means, if we use force and fraud against our fellow man, if we go to government to try to make things happen, to try to do things that we want to have them do, we'll get in trouble. Now, I don't mind going to government to try to stop them from doing things that are hurting people. That's fine. Lobby like crazy for that. But don't go to government to try to get them to help our special interest. The Constitution is designed to support the general welfare. The word general welfare is the opposite of special interest. The Congress has the power to tax in the interest of the general welfare. What that means is they are not allowed to tax for the special interests. They are not allowed to do Medicare. There's nothing constitutional about Medicare, not to mention Medicare for all. Medicare, Social Security, it's not constitutional. Constitution's gone. And we have to accept that, sadly. So anyhow, as we build our new system, let's try to stay moral, try to stay ethical, because if we fail to, the laws of physics and the laws of nature will take over. The laws of physics, when you jump off the side of a building, you're going to end up being road pizza. The laws of nature, when you defy those laws of nature, the natural law, you'll end up being intellectual road pizza. So I want to thank you for all being heroes and being a huge part of this process. And I'm really kind of done, but I have this book that I wrote many years ago called Assume the Physician, and it's going to be out there, out that door on those tables, and I'm not going to accept money for these, but if you take one, I'll sign it, but you have to promise by the first natural law, which is do what you agree to do, you have to promise to donate money to the Docs for Patient Care Foundation. And you have to do it every month. You can do $1, $5, $10, but if you do it, you get it for free. And my signature makes it oh so much more valuable. So in this book, which has nothing to do with, well, it has morals and ethics in it, but it's got titles like Overdosing on Drug Reps. That's one of the chapter titles. Bureauxidative Stress. You know, You Can Sleep When You're Dead. That's one of the titles. Lighting a Fire Under the Match. You know, those kind of titles. It's kind of funny. And my humor I couldn't use very much because it's mostly like Eddie Murphy way back in the 80s, and I wouldn't be able to get away with that. When my bosses are here, can't do that. So, but this one's kind of got a lot of that in, so it might offend a lot of your sensibilities. But I hope you enjoy it. Come on out, and I'll sign a couple of copies. Thank you very much for your time.